Hey, what is up guys? So we are going to be doing a deck profile on Frog Monarchs. A pretty easy deck to play, but it'll take a few rounds of practicing to fully master this deck. But it is pretty budget friendly also. There are some cards in the extra that can get pricey, but you should be able to play the deck perfectly fine without some of those cards. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump right into the deck profile. I'll explain the choices as we go along. And I do want to mention real quick that these cards in the side deck are not the actual side deck cards. These are just cards you can swap in and out if you happen to not own some of these cards, or if you just don't like them. So let's go ahead and get started. So first off, Triple Battle Fader. Battle Fader, fantastic card. It stops you from getting OTK'd, throws a monster on board so you can actually tribute for a Monarch next turn. Next up we have probably one of the best Monarchs ever to come out in the game. It is Caius, the Shadow Monarch. So pretty awesome effect, to just banish any card on the field. One thing I do want to mention, sometimes there are times where banishing Caius for game is the most viable option, because maybe they don't control a dark monster, and if you attack you might get Mirror Force deprisoned. So sometimes remember, you can always banish himself to make your opponent take that 1,000 points of damage if they're at low life. Next up, Dark Dust Spirit. This card is too good. Don't take this card out. I really advise you guys to keep this card in here. This card is just so good. It is a spirit, which means it will return to your hand, but it's so good against decks that swarm. Something like Karakuri or something like Six Samurai, where they swarm really hard first turn. If you drop this, you can simply just win the game straight up because of that. Back when Six Samurais were really popular, man, this card was MVP in my Frog Monarch deck. Pretty awesome card. Next up, 2 Effect Feather. It's pretty simple. It's the only tuner that you play in the deck, other than Birdman, which is the next card. This card is so awesome. I'm a little bit sad that it is at 1, so I didn't actually put this card in here, but I do want to show you guys this card. This card is actually pretty darn good, but since there's only one Birdman, it's kind of difficult to make. But it's Locomotion Argenic, so basically it just steals your opponent's monster with the highest level, and you make that with Caius plus a Birdman. But if you have the room, or you just don't happen to own some of these other cards, or you don't have access to them, you can run Locomotion Argenics. The card's like $1, so or apparently 81 cents on average. But yeah, Birdman just opens up a lot of dirty plays. You can bounce back Caius's, you can bounce back maybe this card if it got Effect Failure, because if spirits get Effect Failure, they obviously won't return, so keep that in mind as well. Or Fiendish Chain or something like that, they won't return, so Birdman can help you out with that. Birdman just opens up a lot of dirty plays is what it comes down to. Next up, Gorth, Emissary of Darkness, another awesome card to actually bounce back with Birdman, and then you can maybe tribute Birdman and the token if it's low for like a Light and Darkness Dragon or something like that, which is the next card. You play Gorth because there's no back row other than this card, and with this card, obviously it's not going to be like dead ever. So Gorth is just a fantastic card. And then 2 Light and Darkness Dragon, because it's a really good card, and it's another light card. So if you actually want to play BLS in here, you can definitely fit it in, because there's also Slacker, Magician, there's Effect Failures, and you can definitely fit in BLS in here if you wanted to do so. And Light and Darkness Dragon is a fantastic card. It just wins games sometimes. Next up, 2 Maxi. It's just 2 Maxi, 2 Veilers, kind of like a lot of, I would say, most decks it's just standard. I'd say it's good to have, especially in a deck that doesn't really have any back row other than like this card really. It's just good to have some answers when your opponent wants to play a little bit more aggressive. Next up, 2 Ryza, the Storm Monarch. This is probably the second best card, second best Monarch card actually. This card is it's really nice because you can just hit any synchro, XYZ just gets rid of it, and then you attack directly. It's a nice card. Next up, Ronin Toden, just an excellent card to go for a Gotchi play. Basically, he just used a Gotchi, and he also has 2,000 defense, so if you need to stall, he's pretty awesome. Next up, 3 Swap Frog, because it's always good to open up with this card, because if you don't draw a Monarch, sometimes you can exhaust a lot of your resources too fast in this deck, so it's nice to have 3 Swap Frog. Next up, this is kind of like the tech of the deck. These aren't actually Monarchs, but these cards are just too good not to play, especially in this format, because let me go ahead and go over End of Anubis first. So these next 2 cards, they basically shut down the high tier decks, but End of Anubis, pretty awesome card. So as long as this card remains face up on the field, the effects of spell, trap, and effect monsters that target a card or cards in the graveyard or that activate in the graveyard are negated. So that hurts Mermills, Prophecy, it hurts the E-Dragons, it hurts Fire Fist, it hurts like so many decks. It's just so awesome. So End of Anubis, fantastic card. Unfortunately has 0 defense, so if it gets Book of Moon, yeah, it's probably gonna die. But he's just a excellent card. and you know, he's just like a tech card. You can definitely not play him if you want to play maybe 2 Vanity's Fiend, which is the next super anti-meta card in here. This card absolutely destroys decks. There are so many times where if you drop a first turn Vanity's Fiend, certain decks just lose straight up, because if they can't special summon, they're going to lose. And you know, it's got decent attack, and at least it has some defense, but defense isn't too high on it. But if they're going to like flip it face down, Tsukiyomi or whatever, yeah, it's not going to be too good. But Vanity's Fiend is still an excellent card because, like I said, it shuts down certain decks. I mean, Vanity's Emptiness is a really popular card, and there's so many times where Vanity Emptiness makes it game after you've, you know, swarmed or something like that. Next up, 2 Tragodia. It prevents OTKs, and it's awesome because it allows you to manipulate the level of itself, and therefore you can really, it basically allows you access to Balancer, the camera card. I think it's number 25, Force Focus. If I remember correctly, yeah, this card allows you access to that if you want to play that. It's not a bad card at all. Also, there's one card I want to mention, the Gaia Dragon, the Thunder Charger. I just didn't have room for it, but if you do happen to have room or don't have some of these cards, Gaia Charger is not a bad card at all. But yeah, Tragodia basically allows you to XYZ a lot easier in the deck. Next up, triple Treeborn Frog. You can opt to play 2 if you want to, but most of the time you just want to open up with a Treeborn or a Swap Frog. Otherwise, like I said, you're going to exhaust a lot of your resources like early on. Like if you happen to have like nothing but like a Battle Fader, sometimes you don't want to drop a Battle Fader on like, you know, just a, you know, monster that has like 1300 attack, but you have to because you've been taking the damage for several turns and you just didn't draw a Treeborn or a Swap Frog. Next up, 1 creature swap, because it's always good to give your opponent a face-up attack position 100 attack monster, and you can steal their huge monster, which is always, you know, dirty to do. Next up, Dark Hall, 2 enemy controller. You can opt to play more enemy controller, but you know, sometimes if you don't have the Swap Frog or Treeborn Frog, to get the Treeborn Frog early on into the graveyard, it can be dead. But this card is just fantastic. Next up, because, you know, there's no traps in this deck, and you need to, you know, get rid of your opponent's stuff to make sure your monsters go through, because generally you're only going to have 1 summon per turn in this deck. I mean, you have the Treeborn, and then you sack for Monarch or sack for, you know, whatever card you want to go for, and you need your plays to go through. Next up, 1 for 1. You can opt to play Foolish Burial instead if you want to. I just personally like 1 for 1 because it opens up a lot of plays for huge synchro plays, especially with enemy controller. It just, you know, it lets you get the Effect Veiler or another Treeborn Frog. And if you can combo it with Birdman, you can do some really nasty stuff. Like, I love going 1 for 1, Effect Veiler, then bounce back the Effect Veiler to go for Birdman, then I can still go for a synchro play, and then after I go for my big push, I still have an Effect Veiler if I didn't OTK them. So I really like 1 for 1. Next up, 1 Duality, because sometimes you don't always special summon, you know, on your turn. So you know, you have the option for Soul Exchange. You can attribute their monsters and stuff like that. So it's always good. I think 1 Duality is okay in the deck, because sometimes if you have Caius and you have more Monarchs, you don't want to just, you know, commit to the field. Maybe they don't have any monsters. They don't have any cards in the field. Oh, I do also want to mention that these are mandatory effects. So if Ryza is the only card in the field, you have to target Ryza and put him back to the top of your deck. So don't summon a Ryza or a Caius if there's nothing on the field. Caius can technically banish itself though, so keep that in mind as well. That's not bad. And then lastly, for the trap, we have Treacherous Trap Hole, just because, you know, there's no traps in here. But I do want to mention some of the cards over here that are in the side area that you can play. Like I said, you can play BLS in the deck, no problem. If I was going to play it, I would probably bump up the Effect Veiler up to 3, and it just helps out. And also, I'd probably main deck 1 Cyber Dragon. I love this card so much in Frog Monarchs. There's so many times where you play against Karakuris or Giria, and it's just like, it makes it game. But don't forget to put Chimera Tech Fortress Dragon in your extra deck if you're going to main deck 1 or 2 Cyber Dragons. This card is just an awesome card against anti-meta in general. Also, if your Monarch gets negated, you know, sometimes it's just good to have another summon. Next up, DD Crow. It's just another hand trap because you don't really have anything to protect your stuff with, and DD Crow can ruin plays like when E-Dragons go for the Dorish Dragon, you just banish their target, or if you're playing against Blackwings to go Blizzard, target this, you go nope. And it's just a decent card. And it's another dark. So if you wanted to like up the dark count, maybe play some tour guides in here. I mean, you already have triple Battle Fader. Technically, yes, I know that they get banished. But the thing is, if you overlay with, say, Battle Fader and what's it called? Battle Fader and like Treeborn Frog, you can overlay for Slacker Magician, which is a light also, and that'll just help put Battle Fader back in the graveyard, and this is also a light. So it's really easy to play BLS in here. But yeah, that's just an awesome way to use Battle Fader and then put him back in the graveyard. Also, another thing I wanted to mention, which is really awesome, you can 1-for-1 Battle Fader, and then you can Birdman to put Battle Fader back in your hand. So if you really want to prevent yourself from getting OTK'd, that is also a cool play you can do. Next up, Dupe Frog. There is a thing called the Dupe Frog lock, so your opponent can't select another monster as an attack target. If you happen to have 2 of these on the board, your opponent can't attack at all. So that's pretty awesome, but he's got 2,000 defense, and then he searches up for Swap Frog majority of the time. But you can't add Frog the Jam, because Frog the Jam is too good. I don't know why there's so much hate for that card, but anyways, next card up, Jinzo. This build is actually very similar to the one that actually topped in Austin, Texas. It got 4th place, I believe. He was main decking in Jinzo. Like I said, I just kind of updated this deck because this card is too good. If you want to, you can swap it out for a Jinzo. I really like Jinzo first turn against certain decks, but against the higher tier decks, traps aren't really that relevant. Because pretty much the top deck, guys, if you guys didn't know, pretty much it's still Dragons, Prophecy, I'd say, Mermails, and Fire Fist. Those are probably the most popular decks. And Fire Fist, they can just go Tanky, Bear, Pop, and then they're home free. So Jinzo's just not so great against some of the higher tier meta decks, but it's good against a lot of other things like small decks like Black Wings and other small decks. But yeah, a lot of against the high tier decks is just not that great. Next up, since some decks. Again, it's just one of those cards where it's not good against like the high tier decks, but Mobius, it lets you pop up to 2 spell trap cards on the field, which is it's nice to have. Plus, if they happen to throw in Gozen or Reveler of Warlords, it definitely does help. Which I'll show you guys that card later. Let me just show you guys the card right now. It was getting sided against when Frog Monarchs were popular. People used to side in Gozen match or Revelry of Warlords, so you couldn't tribute because it'd be just it'd be different type or attribute, so it would cause problems. But this card is not bad at all. Next up, Obelisk. This card can win games. It's so good. Unfortunately, against E-Dragons, they'll just go Black Rose, but against certain other decks, they lose to Obelisk because it's a very good card. Next up, if you want to play a Lancer build, you can actually use Poison Draw Frogs, Dupe Frogs, and you can main deck Sea Lancer, which is also another card, but this is the deck profile for Frog Monarchs, so that's kind of different. I mean, you can technically throw Sea Lancers in here, but I would say definitely up the count of your Ronin Totems and your Dupe Frogs and Poison. You really only need 1 Poison Draw Frog. It's just nice to have. You can play more Vanity's Fiend. This card is it's really good against a lot of the meta decks right now. You can play more Econs, more Soul Exchanges if you wish. I think 2 and 2 is just it's pretty standard and good. And like I said, you can play Foolish. Another decent card is Spiritual Water Oi. So you tribute 1 water monster, and then you look at your opponent's hand, and you select 1 card from their hand, and you send it to the graveyard. So basically what that comes down to is you do it on Ronin Totem, but majority of the time it's going to be on like a Tree Warner or Swap Frog. It's better to do it on Tree Warner Frog, obviously, because Swap Frog has that effect where it can bounce itself back to the hand, which is always good. Now let's go ahead and go over the extra deck. Now, like I mentioned before, some of these cards are not very budget friendly, but for the most part, you don't really need them for this deck, but it's definitely nice to have them. So we have Catastor, we have Armades, Keeper of Boundaries. I like this card so much because, obviously Enemy Controller is a fantastic card. Pretty much what it comes down to is if you play Blue Gens and you make this card, majority of the time you're going to win your games. If they don't happen to have like a I don't know what they can have, like you can't like Mirror Force this, you can't like do anything against this card. If you're playing Blue Gens, this card just wins games on its own, like I mentioned. Yeah, they're gonna be very sad. Like Dark Hole is an out. I'm trying to think of other outs. There's very few outs to Armades. I mean, they're gonna have to like use multiple cards. They're gonna have to either XYZ. I know there's like Blue Gen Carnation, but yeah, Armades is just a fantastic card. Next up, Black Rose, Formula, Scrap Dragon, Star Eater is also a decent card to make against the Blue Gens, but this card's obviously, most of the time, it's probably easier to make. Stardust is just, Stardust. This card can get kind of pricey, but it's not too bad. It's not like it's like a $50 plus card. 2 Gotchis is always nice. Gauntlet Launcher, Photon Strike Bouncer is nice, then Slacker Magician. You can, if you happen to not own some of these cards, like I said, there's Force Focus, but I can't think of any other good. Let's go ahead and check out the other level rank 6 XYZs because I haven't checked up on them in a long time. This card is pretty dirty if you can pull it off, but I don't think it's that viable. This card is actually pretty good if you happen to have this. It is a secret rare though, but it's not too expensive. This card is also not bad at all, so like I said, if you happen to not own some of these cards, or if you just want to put them in there, you could definitely do so. I definitely like this card though, because Scrap Dragon, Plus, Primo Frog coming back every turn, it's infinite ammo basically, and Scrap Dragon will just pop all day. And there's also a card called Thought Ruler Archfiend, a really old synchro that saw a lot of play, but now it's just kind of like, it doesn't see much play now. But yeah, this has been the deck profile for Frog Monarchs, a pretty easy deck to play, but like I said, it'll take a lot of practice to actually master the deck and really understand when to battle Fader correctly and when to, you know, what targets to Caius and what targets to Ryza against certain decks. And then this card is just, oh man, I love this card against 6 Samurai so much. But if you guys have any suggestions for this deck, let me know in the comment section below, because I think we can improve this deck. I mean, it's been pretty standard. I mean, it's maybe the difference of, I would say, like, maybe 5 cards, and it's pretty much been like the same deck pretty much that's been topping at most like the regionals and tournaments that, you know, because this deck always appears at YCSs, it always is there, and always usually takes like a top 32 at least once format. So, you know, it's not a bad deck at all, and it's pretty budget friendly like I mentioned. But have some fun with Frog Monarchs, guys, and it is a slow deck though, so if you like, you know, OTKing, this is probably not a deck necessarily to OTK. But you can technically OTK with enemy controllers, and if you dirty them with like 1-for-1 creature swaps and all that kind of other dirty stuff. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day. Asian Eyes signing out.